Hey, my name's Andy, this is Victor. We are at the Philadelphia Barber Company in Philadelphia. Today I'm going to show you how to do a modern style on kind of a vintage look. We're going to do a two around the ears, taper in the back, taper the sideburns, give him a hard part, and trim up the top to preserve those really nice waves that he's got going on. Okay, so I'm going to start with a 3. The main portion of the haircut is going to be a 2, but to blend it in to the top nicely, we're going to start with a higher guard. So I'm going to go around and follow the shape of his head and kind of bring it down with his hairline here. I want to keep it low in the back because he does have this cowlick here. You can kind of see it already has some volume. The higher you go, the more trouble you're going to have blending that in and making it not pop up. I'm going to keep the 3 a little bit lower on the parted side. I want to use a lot of shears right here, so this part has more movement. If you just take the buzz all the way up, you're going to lose some of that nice longer length for him to push back and play with. And for parts, sometimes I like to not flake up as much and kind of just go under a little bit so we can create this weight here. So you're not cutting into the part too much. When you're fading, flicking up is really important, but when I get closer to the part, I kind of like to just go more in, and then I'll come in and fade this in with my scissors. So we've got our baseline with our 3. I'm gonna come back around with 2. Follow the ear. And here you can start flicking up because we're going to be fading the 2.5 into the 3 eventually when we come back around. 2.5, open it up, and then flick up into that 3. I always like to check my work in the mirror. You can see some more dark spots if you do it that way. We're going to come back to blending this in just a second. But first we want to fade in the sideburns and the nape of the neck. So make your line first with your 0. Be sure to flick up here too so you can make your blend easier. Open all the way. It's a lot easier to fade the back of the neck in when there aren't any crazy cowlicks, so I won't have to go over with my scissors too much to make that look nice. Take your 1. I open it up first. Make my guideline. And I'm kind of pressing down his neck here. Mainly out of habit, but also to stretch the skin, you're going to get a better fade because there's less skin to kind of get caught on the clipper. So if you see me doing this, that's what I'm doing. And I take my 1.5, open it up. So it's basically a 2. That's what we have right here. And here I'm just lightly going around any dark places that I see and kind of using the corner of my clipper because I don't want to bring the fade up a lot higher since we already set our guidelines. Open it up, kind of do that a little bit higher. There's still a little bit here that I want to get, so I'm going to grab my 1/2, swap out my comb for a little brush. This gets all the hair off the neck so you can kind of see what you're doing more. And it also gets all of the hair going in the same direction so your clipper can catch it evenly. This is open. I'm just going over this line that I created when I didn't have a guard on. I'm gonna close it about halfway so we don't bring it up too much. And again, just using this corner here, open it a little bit. I play with my lever a lot depending on, you know, how thick the line is here. If it's just a little tiny bit of a line, I'll open it so I don't bring it up all the way, and you can always come back around and fade it in more. Now we're gonna fade in the sideburns. So same deal, closed all the way. Make your guideline. I'm gonna do both sides at a time, so I don't have to keep running back and forth to get new guards. Open. And the open part, you're taking it to just about the top of the ear here. I don't want to give him a very dramatic taper on the side of the sideburn, or on the sideburn. I just want it to naturally fade in. I'm going to grab my 1. Remember our base here is a 2. So grab the 1, open it up all the way so you don't make too drastic of a line here. And I'm using the corners here more. I don't want to make, like I just said, a stark line, so you can kind of lightly touch the corner and you'll fade it in that way. Especially with a tiny little section like this sideburn, you know, you're not going around the whole head. Same on the other side. Open, corner. Just to finish up some of the lighter hairs here, I'm going to grab my half and just kind of go around. So instead of taking my 1.5 and fading it up with the clipper, I want to do it manually so I have more control of where that fade is going to be. You can already see that it's really thick right here. And just kind of clipper over comb until that line is gone. And then we're going to start going around the ear. Always bend the ear down. And I've said this before in other videos, but this bone is really important when it comes to shaping it up towards the nape of the neck. You don't want to cut in too much if you're going for more of a natural look. Just follow it down. And for him, I kind of want to get rid of this drastic line over the ear. So I'm going to take my comb and get rid of that weight a little bit. And that way it'll naturally taper down with his sideburn down to here. If someone doesn't have a beard, I feel like it's nice to always taper in the sideburns unless they want a distinct line of where to shave their face if they have really coarse facial hair, then it is helpful to kind of edge it off. But I personally always feel like tapering it in is a better option, especially if they have lighter colored hair.
I think it feeds into that vintage look also.
Yeah,
It's
like effortlessly handsome. Something that you'll notice the more you work with people in front of you is the more that people are smiling, the more that the ear kind of bunches up here. You see that? Yeah. So I like to also taper around the ear for that reason, because if you don't do that, when they're smiling and they're, you know, out and about, this gets all bunched up and it doesn't look like a nice fade down. So if you taper that in, you're kind of covering them from all angles. And it also makes the haircut last a lot longer. I know some barbers will disagree with me that, you know, you don't want to give them a haircut like that lasts weeks, but that's what I aim for. I think a good haircut you shouldn't need another one in like a week unless you're getting a skin fade and want to keep it fresh. This should last him a good month at least. So we've got that tapered around the ear. Before I move on to my shear work here, I want to fade it in with clipper over comb. We can get this line out a lot more effectively that way, and then it will make our shear work a lot smoother. So keeping the hair dry, keeping a clipper closed. Be really careful when you do this. I've seen, people go to do this and they go here and then your whole hair, and then you have to give them a skin fade, and that's a whole other deal. Just this weight right here, flick up and follow your comb. If your comb is pointing towards you, it's foolproof. You're not gonna cut into the hair because this is the tapering motion is bringing it out. This is a very minute detail, but it is really gonna make your next steps a lot better. It may not look like I'm doing much, but it's fading the underneath of the hair. And I keep combing it back because I want to see the direction that I'm eventually going to be styling it, and you want to make sure that the movement is properly going all together before you cut the hair. Same deal on this side. The only difference is, we're not parting it here. If I were to have sectioned his hair here, it would have looked identical. And I usually section the hair at the corner of the head. I also think it's nice to leave it a little darker here. When I come back around and crisp up this line a little bit, it just shows more definition. You see that a lot with very intense skin fades. They will leave it darker there so the skin pops out more and this line pops out more. You can do that with classic hairstyles like this. It's just a more mild version of it. In the back of the head, remember, we're leaving it longer back here. His cowlick is here, so don't take it and just take that chunk off because it's long. We want that long piece there. And by pulling the comb farther away when I do that, that's just extending this taper motion instead of keeping the comb here. It's like up and away. And that way you won't go too short, you won't go too high. I feel like a lot of barbers would say that maybe I'm doing too much work here, I'm making it harder for myself, but that's the difference between a detailed haircut and a 20-minute haircut that just makes it shorter. We're trying to add personalization to his head shape, to his hair texture, and by going in and going in depth, you're really gonna make that haircut a lot better. I could have brought my 4 and I could have made a shortcut for myself, but shortcuts are never the best option. Okay, so shear portion. We're gonna spray him down. I like to get the hair really nice and wet in the beginning because over time, it starts to dry. You can always respray it. Putting water in the hair also shows you a little bit more of how the hair is going to react when you put product into it. So it's a little bit of a preview. And I know he wears product most of the time. So I'm going to take my Hattori Hanzo talons. These are used for wet and dry hair. I have one specific for dry hair, so I usually just use these for wet. We're just going to trim his hair. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Like I said, this wave is awesome, and the shorter you cut it, the harder it is to kind of style. So I don't like to cut it with too much texture. So I'm going to take about 1/2 inch and bluntly cut it across. I'm taking about maybe 1/2 inch sections, 3/4 inch sections, taking 1/2 inch off. For this style also, I like to keep the front just a little bit longer. A lot of styles, especially, you know, shorter on the sides, longer on top, the front is like where the action is. I've given him multiple haircuts before this, so I've already set myself up for that. So you're not going to be seeing me take less here necessarily, because his hair is already in the shape that I want it in. And he takes really good care of his hair.
I try.
So now I took from the front and brought it back. Still taking the same amount and going straight across. Then when you get to that front section, I like to kind of pull it down and take the same amount off. This allows me to get a better line with his hairline, because you're bringing it down straight from that area rather than up and missing some of the parts that need to be even. The front you can texturize a little bit. I don't like to texturize back here, so it's just kind of all one piece. But since this is where the fun area is, you can point cut this area. Still take about the same amount, but just chop into it a little bit more. I'm going to cross-check it before I work on this area. And cross-checking just means, so first you're cutting this way, and now we're going to be cutting this way. You can kind of see any discrepancies that you missed, like right here. You see this ridge right here. Even it up. This little point. Don't go too crazy with your cross-checking and give him like a whole other haircut on top, or else it's just going to keep getting shorter and shorter. It's really mainly just to get any obvious points that are sticking out that don't belong there. For this area, we want to follow the shape of his head. This area I feel like is tricky for a lot of people, because this is where the hair starts to grow in a completely different direction. It starts to grow down rather than, you know, having the ability to go back or do whatever. So if you cut that part too short, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to be stubby and just frill out and give him a headache. So take the corner and you can just see from where you cut here to where it starts to become a part of this part. Just that little corner there. Don't go too crazy in the cowlick area again. I like to leave his long. Some people you can get away with going a little bit shorter, but it's always better to err on the side of caution with the length back here. When we blow dry it, we can see if it's too long and we can shorten it up when it's dry. But if you cut it too short when it's wet and then you dry it, you have to wait for it to grow. Okay, so we're going to be back to this section where we kind of were with our clipper. We're going to do shear over comb and just make it, I really like, you know, the length here, but there's an obvious line, so we just want to blend in that line. This has really good movement already, so we don't want to go up too high. Kind of section it off if that's easier for you. So that took the bulk of the line out. We're going to revisit that area after I blow dry it, just to make sure, you know, that we like how it all flows together. We might take some texturizing shears and run it through there just to make it a little less bulky. But we're going to repeat what we just did on that side, on this side. And again, the only difference is he has a part, and you can see where we disconnect the haircut. And like I said, this goes down and this goes to the side. We want to have a nice weighted part, but we don't want it to be obviously unblended. So don't go too high with it. Again, we're going to come around later with our texturizing shears and just make that a little less dense. But we've got the blend under control now. And that was in part with the clipper work that we did beforehand and coming around with the shears on the wet hair. So with parts and cowlicks, the part comes all the way back, and if the part is on the opposite side of the cowlick, you want it to do almost like a perfect horseshoe, and you can see where the hair starts to grow differently. I'm mentioning the growth a lot because his cowlick is very strong, but he does have a really strong growth pattern. So we can follow that all the way around, and this is a nice circle here. And this is gonna be pretty consistent with the part that we did here, the length anyways. So we're gonna put his hard part in. After we put his hard part in, we'll blow dry it, take a closer look at everything and make sure it's all blended in. For the hard part, make sure that this hair is nice and wet, just so you don't get any stray hairs in there. We want a nice, crisp line. Start with the trimmer. This is the wall mag. I am short, so I like to have people kind of, there you go, yeah. Especially if people are like 7 foot tall and up here. We previously did a hard part. You can already see those little frills. If they previously have a hard part, the last thing that you want to do is cut into this part of the hair. If you cut into that part of the hair, you're going to have frills coming out, and it's going to be harder for them to grow that in rather than to grow this in. Preferably, you follow the exact line, but if you were to cut in by accident, don't cut into this. It's not good. So I like to take my comb it, and kind of push it down. Push it down so you can really see the line. Sorry, move you towards me. Okay. Line and just short down. We're gonna come around and define it with a straight razor. So if it's not really thick, that's fine. You just want to make your guideline. Comb the frills down, get them out of the way. Right here, I'm using the corner rather than the full trimmer like I was doing here because his head starts to curve. So if we were to, do a straight line, we'd be cutting into our part here. So I just kind of use my corner and come around with it. If he were to have had his cowlick on this side, I would stop at the cowlick, but his cowlick's on the other side. So we don't want to go, all the way around his head, but we do want it to come to a point where you don't see it stop here if you're looking at him head on. So you can see I still left some of the frills on this area. That's fine if you kind of go back in and go up and see those little hairs go away after the initial line that you've made. And then don't worry about these. We're going to get that with the straight razor. You have a little bit more control with the straight razor. The shorter the hair is, the easier it is for the straight razor to grab. So this can just take all the hair off. So that's scary. We don't want to just make a fat line on his head. I've already prepared my straight razor. I'm going to spray this so it has a little bit more lubrication. And stretching the skin is still really important whenever you're using your straight razor. So I kind of put my fingers in the hair and use my thumb to press the scalp away from me, and just go down. Kind of just little tiny motions. You're just going to do that until you see the hard part from the last cut go away, or if they haven't had a hard part before, until you've reached the desired thickness that you want. It's always good to check in with the client beforehand too of how thick you want the hard part. I always like to give them, you know, a minimal thin hard part and have them tell me that they want it thick, or check in with them asking if they want it thicker, because you can always make it thicker, but you can't make it thinner. Kind of same with the clipper. Sometimes I use the corner of it if there's like one hair that I need to get. You can see it in the scalp. It's just like one little guy, you can just get it with the corner. Something that's really popular with hard parts also is opening up the front area a little bit more, so it kind of gets thinner as you go back. Don't go crazy and start messing with their hairline too much, but you can kind of just clean up this little area and bring it out a little bit more. So I'm going to blow dry his hair. We're gonna make this weight a little bit more texturized. You're gonna see how it looks dry. I always like to see how it looks dry first, so we don't just like go all in wet and then we're surprised when it's dry. This helps create volume in the front. Pulling the hair away from the head also takes some of the heat off of the scalp. If you concentrate heat on the head too much, you're gonna burn their scalp, and that is awful. I like to hold the hair here when I blow dry the part, so we don't ruin what we just blow dried. Again, pushing that back, because that's where we're gonna style it. Having a concentrator nozzle on a hair dryer is awesome with this style, because you just blow it down. As for the Cowlick, his is going to be pushed down, so we can blow dry it in that direction. Usually I will blow dry it in its natural state and then re-correct it, but since we left it long on purpose, we can just kind of blow dry that down in a way that's easy for him to style. As the hair starts to get more dry, I put it on a medium heat setting until it's completely dry. Test it out with your hand. And then once it's dry, go to a full setting. You're going to close the cuticles of the hair, give it a little bit more shine, prevent it from becoming bandaged, and set the style in place, specifically the front. So that's the first thing everybody sees. That's the first thing he's going to see when he looks in the mirror. The front needs to be extra good. So there's just a few details that I want to go over. And usually after I blow dry the hair, I always go back around on the crown of the head. I'm really happy with where his part is now, but like right here, it's a little bit too thick for my liking. So I take my texturizers instead of my full scissors and just get the ends a little bit. Some people like to do this with their regular shears. I really like the effect that this gives by using my texturizers. Some people have frilly hairs right here. His behaves really, really well and goes with his part. Sometimes if they're really unruly, you can kind of texturize them a little bit shorter and it will go in with the rest. Unless you've left this really dark here, then it can kind of go with the rest and go with the arc of their head. So for the cowlick, you can kind of take it as if you're going to be taking your regular shears, and doing the cut. You can see this large hump there. So I'm going to texturize that until, it's less dense. You can kind of take that corner out. But the length is still there. And by saving this part for last, you're you're really preserving this cowlick and making it easier on them. They're going to be the ones styling their hair every day. They don't have the luxury of standing behind their head and seeing where it needs to go. So it's your job as a barber to predict what's going to happen for them. That's why I always like to do it dry. It's harder to predict the hair when it's wet. The next detail I'm going to work on is I just really want to look at the fade that we created in the beginning. I'm pleased with it, but you could always go around and just make sure, like right here, I feel like it's a little dark, so I want to use my shears to go over that. Just tiny little details. By using your shears, you're going to allow more movement when it grows out also. There's another benefit of using texturizers up here. When it grows out, it will not be as blunt, so it will have more room to kind of flow. Also, with skull shapes, usually right here is where the head indents in. So if you're gonna have any dark spots on your fade, that's mostly where it's going to be. So you don't need to do anything crazy because the fade is even, but it wouldn't hurt to go over it. Just don't chop into it and ruin your fade. So he has a part, obviously, just did that. So we're gonna start there. Don't gunk it up too much, but I like to start there and on the sides, and then kind of mess up his hair just a little bit. And then the last place my hands are gonna go in the front. If you start in the front with a bunch of product on your hands, you might make it look really greasy and it's just like product right there and it's a little aggressive. Just kind of lightly dust it over. I'm gonna go over it with a comb. Start at the part again, brush it over. That's the direction his hair is growing. Combing it through really helps just blend the hair product into the hair, especially clay. And I'm combing this back. That's the movement that we wanted to give the hair. It's like down and back. And then you can take the top and give it kind of a pompadour style by lightly pulling it up and over. And then here we're gonna go back, just like on the side. I think by putting clay in a pompadour-ish style like this is another way you can kind of modernize a classic haircut. Classic haircuts and vintage hairstyles really love to grease up their hair. Castor oil, oil-based pomades, they would just keep putting it on, but that's how their hair would listen to them. But not a lot of people are into that shiny look anymore. It's all about the matte look. So with the clay, you can kind of manipulate the hair, get that pompadour style in, push this back, but have a little bit more freedom with your hair. So I always end with a hot towel on the back of the neck. Softens up the skin a little bit and it feels good. Get some hot lather on there.
Does your father see a lot of guys in the shop there?
Not as many. It's mostly women, but he does see a lot of guys.
Yeah, your dad is Philadelphia hairdressing royalty. Mm-hmm. Give your dad a plug?
My dad owns OG Salon and Spot, 17th and Locust. Feel free to check him out. He's the guy in the front window still cutting hair after 40-something years.
Claim to fame is he did my wife's hair for our wedding.
Their neck is always, or is ever a little bit red after you use hot lather, you shave it, you're totally fine. Some people just have lighter skin and the warmth will just make it a little bit red, it'll go away. So I'm gonna dust them off, make sure everything is exactly where I want it to be. I'm just gonna give them one more comb through to make it perfect. I'm Andy. We're at the Philadelphia Barber Company. This is Victor, and we just made him look good.
Heyo, what's up guys? Did you know that Beardbrand has stuff not only for your beard, but also the hair? In fact, got some shampoo and some conditioner, amazing stuff that's going to get your hair game at the same level as your beard game. Check it out over at beardbrand.com.